need anything important, keep covered all the good stuff already. So thank you, and have a good meeting.
Great, thanks, Glenn. Okay, so the status Okay, so each of these workshops, there's a link from the OARC staff and the secretary that can give you a report about where we're at. So I will give you a rundown of updates since the last workshop in San Jose. I'm not going to read through OARC mission statement. Most of you in the room are already familiar with this. We're here to make the DNS work better from an operations point of view and understand it better. And to basically foster collaboration between the researchers and the operators. And we are trying to do that. So what we managed to do over the past 5 months since our last workshop, well, first thing I'm pleased to report is that it's not very exciting from a technical point of view, but sustainability is something you can never ever take for granted at a non-profit. And as targeted, we managed to make our first physical service in 3 years. The previous 2 years, we lived with deficit to grow the organization. I'm pleased to say that that was successful, and we actually hit the target. We did an additional data line for internet connection for the first part of the root zone signing key size increase. That went smoothly. That data is available, so thank you to all the group operators and others that contributed to that. We've also completed some new software that Derek will be saying more about. This was generously funded by VeriSign, and it's basically RSSM additions to the existing dnscap software tool. Comcast also generously funded an additional phase of the drool tool that we funded last year. The work on that is underway. Should be completed by the end of Q2. Effectively, this is evolving the drool DNS phase into something that we will call DNS. The other thing we did last year is we took ownership of a couple pieces of software, dnscap and package. We relocated the office, so that is now safely based in Indiana with myself. And as Glenn mentioned, we've done some work on the governance in terms of how the board is actually elected. No, this is not geographic diversity. This is the kind of representation of who all our members are. Like there's an invoicing lump that happens at the beginning and end of the year, and these were people who we never quite managed to engage in terms of bringing into the workshops and the mailing lists, and they decided that they couldn't justify renewing, which is unfortunate. And I mean, some of it is a side effect of the law of merger and acquisition and investor activism in the industry. Changing the situation there. So it's possible we might get some of them back in their new form, but it's not something, as I said, sustainability is never something that you can take for granted. We have a very diverse and supportive member base, but we're working on making sure that this does not continue, figure out who are the people that aren't engaging, and if we can work out ways to bring them more into the community. We're also trying to get ahead of some of the mergers so that when 2 members merge, then we can work out a deal for subscriptions with the 2 new entities that leads to the best possible membership status for the combined entity. So you expect to hear more about that. The other thing is that we've had, OARC has always had organizations who sign up as beneficial supporter members, and they commit to contributing something in kind. They don't always do so. Our process for tracking these, obtaining commitments when they sign up, measuring them against these commitments when it comes up for renewal, is becoming increasingly rigorous, and there will be supporters dropping off because they didn't contribute any data, or they didn't present on our work, or they didn't come to our workshop and talk about their work, or do publications. So
OARC governance model, again, hopefully there's nothing too unfamiliar in here. We're gradually increasing the revenue and expenses. Hopefully this year's budget, we're going to be just over 800K. I believe that our governance is in general in line with best practice for such organizations in our sector. The board is elected, the staff are contractors, the program committee are volunteers, there's a whole bunch of other volunteers and supporters that help us. We have non-profit status in both the US and California. There is, just before the morning break, we're going to do a short business session to talk about the latest governance developments when we'll ask the non-members to leave the room. Who are the board for this year? George sends his apologies, but he sent his avatar instead. David recently joined the board last year. Also, Jaromir from CZNIC. Andre continued on the board, but changed who his affiliation was. And the other 3 board members continue. So, program committee. Again, everyone in the program committee except for Ricardo is here. So if the program committee members could stick their hands up, that would be, so these are the guys who help put it all together. If you've got ideas for talks in future, please by all means approach them or ask any questions. Staff, everyone except William is here. William is unfortunately unable to be with us, so I'll be giving his talk later. No real changes there. We've managed to increase Sue's time a little bit. She was sharing her time between OARC and the NTP Foundation, but she's now effectively dedicated to OARC, and we managed to increase her hours as a consequence of our revenue growth. So it's good to have that. After moving from California to Ohio, we've eventually settled the OARC physical address where we stole all our paper files and other boring stuff at a co-working facility near where I live in Indianapolis, which seems to be a fairly business-friendly environment. It's interesting to work in a building which is a former bowling alley. The only caveat to that is that this is not the address that you will see in our invoices or our tax registration. So please continue to send payments and such like to the Belmont, California address where Pam, our bookkeeper, is based. Nothing too much new to say about membership categories. As I say, we introduced a diamond category and we've had one sign up for that. We're monitoring the supporter status pretty closely. Lots of people approach us and say, oh, we just want to sign up for Blue membership, but that's only available for small organizations for less than 10 employees or less than 1 million revenue. You may also recall around a year ago, we did a retreat to figure out what our strategy is. We've been working that. It got a little bit disrupted. I would have liked more progress, but I was in the process of moving last year, so I haven't made quite as much progress against that. But we seem to be doing okay. We seem to be doing the right things. There's no need for radical overhaul. We don't need to run the organization at a deficit in order to grow it any further. We are in a changing market environment. We're going to need to possibly review the fees to deal with the consolidation that goes on in the industry. And we're also going to have to be a bit more partisan about recovering the costs of workshops. Trying to consult and engage members more, be more rigorous and quantitative about how we decide where our workshops are going to be. Data privacy is definitely an issue we're going to need to do more work on. Although being part of the cybersecurity community was conceived as part of OARC's original mission, this is something that we see ourselves as a facilitator of rather than necessarily an active player. You know, part of the problem with that sector is there's too many damn organizations that all think they should be an active player, so we'd rather not get in the way. But at the same time, we know we have resources which are there to help with abuse prevention and detection. And you know, the other thing when you're running a non-profit in this sector is it's very easy to come up with ideas for what we should do. The hard part is figuring out what the ideas to pursue are. And we figured out, you know, we should prioritize this by revenue because that leads to sustainability, reputation because that keeps the organization in play, and relevance, also making sure that we stay relevant and we don't just become some kind of zombie that's doing stuff that everyone was doing 20 years ago. Say a little bit more about the actual nitty-gritty of the analysis infrastructure when I give William's talk later. But a couple of things from the analysis work that we've seen over the past few months. There has been some confusion about export of what's called derivative data. So there's raw data that we gather, and then there's analysis of that, which is performed. And then once the analysis is complete, the derivative data is supposed to be anonymized, and none of this should be copied off of OARC servers without explicit permission. So even if you think it's anonymized, there's still a formal step that you need to go through to ask us to verify that this data is safe to be copied off OARC servers before you copy it onto your own servers for further analysis or before you publish it. So please ask. Paul Hoffman will be saying a bit more about this in his talk, but there were some bottlenecks that he experienced in terms of our resources. One of these was lack of local storage to the analysis servers. Most of the scratch space is NFS mounted. We figured out a way that we can increase that without spending a huge amount of money. But the other thing is that a lot of you have done great analysis projects in the past, and then you've left all your scratch data lying around, and that reduces the scratch space for active researchers now. So we asked this before, we got a little bit of progress, but please, if the stuff that you did and you don't need the intermediate data anymore, please can you delete it? The other good news is that our budget for this year, we're going to be buying some more powerful analysis servers. Again, I'll say a little bit more of that in William's talk, and potentially we'll be able to dedicate these servers to a particular project for a certain amount of time. Okay, boring financial stuff. We finished the year last year with roughly a 5% surplus, so I'm very happy with that. Financial statements for last year, they were presented and approved at the last meeting, so we're in good shape as far as the auditors are concerned. I'm going to give you some draft figures for, no, this is another zombie slide. Yeah, we audited the 2017, no, that's correct, yeah. The figures for 2017 are not yet audited, neither are the 2018 year-to-date figures. But at the end of the year, we finished with about $250,000 in the bank from cash reserve points of view. Another thing that we've done is that we have defined a reserves policy so that we can essentially build up reserves to continue to run the organization for X amount of time in the absence of further revenue. Again, this is not non-profit good practice. So that has guided the way we've put the budget together for 2018. So finances, we're slightly behind for the year to date because of the unexpected dropouts at the year end. But we're also good at containing our expenses. So you can see that year to date we have. Last year we did the surplus. Year to date we're pretty much very close in terms of revenue and costs. Hopefully we will increase from roughly 700K to a bit over 800K in terms of our revenue expenses for this year. We'll see how it goes. The economy seems to be in good shape overall, but it's not clear that the sector that we're working in is perhaps quite as healthy as that. How do we generate our income? Most of it comes from member fees. There is some degree of donations. We've done well, increasingly well in terms of donations and also grants for software development, project development. So we factored roughly the same in this year as we did last year. So if you have any ideas for project work that you would like to see OARC do and you're willing to fund that or fund part of that, please let us know. Workshops, increasing cost there, but also we're making sure that we get revenue from that, from sponsors, from it being hosted, and from registration fees. Most of our expenditure is on the time of the people that work here. We're going to spend a bit more on capital expenditure this year. It was a bit down last year after spending a lot the previous year for relocating or hosting. Co-location costs are pretty steady. Office rental costs are slightly up. The workshops don't get any cheaper to run. So that's essentially where we are. Bit more about the workshops, or this is the why the hell are we in Puerto Rico slide. So, you know, we have more than once surveyed you, our members. Where do you want us to have the workshops? Do you want us to co-locate them? How many workshops a year do you want us to have? How long do you want these to be? You know, and the message that comes back, 2 workshops a year, no longer than 2 days, not as little as 1 day, and to co-locate with right nano guide to ICANN and ITF meetings. It gets, you know, we'd really like to have these confirmed 2 years out, but once you start co-locating, you finish up with a lot of moving pieces. Dinesh and I think we've figured out a way to make this more deterministic. But I think it's probably worth just restating what are the principles that we use to decide where we're going to be. I think one of these is that we want to rotate amongst the 4 events that you want us to co-locate with. So we don't try and do 2 consecutive NANOG or RIPE or ITF meetings or ICANN meetings. We want to rotate again among the geographic regions. So, you know, obviously a lot of our members are based in Europe and North America, a fair proportion in the Asia-Pacific region, an increasing proportion in the LAC region, not so much Africa, but we'd like to do something about that. So we're trying to balance where we go in terms of these different regions. And, you know, the other big factor is that workshops are expensive, particularly if we're co-locating. So if we can come to somewhere like an ICANN meeting where effectively everything is provided for us for very little cost, then clearly we're going to do that. And then the thing we're doing in the autumn in Amsterdam is something we wanted to do for a while, which is to have a joint meeting with Centre co-located with RIPE again. But by partnering with Centre, we're able to contain the costs for both organizations. Another thing we'd like to do is in-region outreach, so that when we're in a particular region that we haven't spent much time in to reach out to local organizations that we haven't necessarily worked with. Just a reminder for more survey data is that we know it saves you a lot of time and money to co-locate. Co-location generates some challenges for us in terms of figuring out who we're going to co-locate with. It makes it harder to get sponsors because usually the sponsors go for the main event. You know, essentially, this is why you're going to see the registration fees increase, because we need to cover these extra costs of being in bigger, more expensive venues and some of the other challenges. So I'm afraid this is our smallest workshop in 5 years. So, you know, it's always interesting to go to new parts of the world. I'm pretty sure that we'll expose ourselves to members of the ICANN community that haven't seen us before. But clearly, this location has been a challenge for some people. So again, thank you for those of you who are here. Apologies to those of you who are in the webcast who weren't able to make it. You know, apart from blips like this, in general, our workshop attendance has been increasing. It's probably notable that the previous biggest workshop in 2014 was the last time we co-located with a full ICANN meeting. So swings and roundabouts, I guess. So making the workshop sustainable, as I say, there are these challenges in terms of costs and logistics. So if you're willing to sponsor a workshop, we'd love to hear from you. It's getting challenging to get sponsorship because of some of the consolidation trends I talked about in the industry. But the board has thought long and hard about this and decided that we need to move to full meeting cost recovery through fees. So we're not just doing it through sponsorship. And that from the next workshop on, we're going to be charging registration for all attendees. There'll probably still be some level for discount for members, but it won't be free attendance for X number of member contacts anymore. And yeah, it does my head in trying to figure out what our registration scheme is. So we're going to try and do some work in simplifying this so that it doesn't turn into a huge tangle of when you register, whether you're a member, whether you're a designated member contact, whether you're a researcher or a sponsor or a partner organization. So we're going to try and simplify that as well. And thank you for your patience with dealing with the Indico Eventbrite maze on that. So future workshops, as I mentioned, OARC 29 in October, we're back in Amsterdam. We're back with the RIPE meeting, which always works really well. And additionally, we're going to be partnering with Centre Tech for a joint meeting. Next year, we will probably try and get to the AP region, which may be in the spring. If we don't do the AP region in the spring, we'll probably do the LAC region in the fall, and we'll probably also partner with at least one, one of our workshops next year will probably be co-located with one of the 3 NANOG meetings next year. So some work to be done on that. Watch this space. So what are we planning for the coming year? Obviously, this is we're workshops a little bit earlier in the year than usual, so this is more about plans than what we've achieved so far. We want to do further funded software tool development. We got 2 DITLs coming up. The annual one will be in April, date to be confirmed for participants. And then probably in October, we're going to do the next key signing, key roll collection. Actually, it's going to be 2 days before the next workshop, so that'll be fun. We'd still like to do something on DNS stats sharing. That's an interesting challenge as people get more concerned about privacy of data, but if you're interested, we'd still like to do stuff with that. As I say, we've budgeted some money for upgrading the analysis capacity, and we'll probably, hopefully, build some kind of pilot cluster. Conduct policy and reserves policy are 90% done, so this should pretty much be a done deal by the time we get to the end of this month. I mentioned workshop registration, cost recovery, and the board has set as the ambitious target of within by in 2 years' time going to 1 million revenue. So we need to work towards that. That is essentially it from me as far as status is concerned. Happy to take any questions. Okay, well, myself and the various OARC members, staff members are around if you have any questions. One thing I would like to do, Dwayne, if you wouldn't mind coming back up to the podium, is, as I said, we have a lot of support from volunteers, and the program committee do a lot of work to support us. So we have recognition awards. This time, we're going to give it to the 2 program committee members that have served full 3-year terms. One of them's just looked up in surprise. So, Mauricio, would you like to...
Yes, Mauricio, thank you for 3 years of service on the programming committee. We have a small token of our appreciation for you. Hopefully you left room for that in your luggage. All right. And also, Jeff, Mr. Houston, also for serving 3 years. Thank you very much. Yeah, you get 1 year off, and then you can come back, right? So keep that in mind. Yes. All right.
Okay. Thanks, Wayne. Thank you, Jeff and Maurizio. Again, just before we switch to the next presentation, I won't talk you through these sales points, but if you're not already a member and you're thinking about a member and you need to make the case inside your organization, then here where we think why it's worth being an OARC member. Okay, so enough from me for now. Next up is Jerry Lindstrom, our software engineer, chief developer, and Jerry is going to be talking about some of the work that he's been doing over the past few months that he will also be demonstrating.
So hi, like Keith said, my name is Jerry. I'm the developer for OARC, and I'm going to talk what I've been up with since the last meeting. But first I want to iterate the projects and funding page we have, where you can see all the software, how if you want to fund it, you can read about it, and then all the links to all the code that we have, and the mailing lists, and some of the policies we also have regarding the development. So, like Keith said before, the RSSM project, that was funded by VeriSign is complete. And it brought some stuff into the tool sets we have. So first, we have IP fragmentation reassembly extension for the helper library pcap-thread, and this is used in both dnscap, drool, and DAC. The IP fragmentation reassembly is just enabled in dnscap, so there's a few extra extended options you can play with to enable this. We also implement the TCP reassembly. This is actually code coming from DAC. And then something else was also to peek into ongoing TCP streams. Because the code that existed needed to see SYN-ACK, and well, what I've seen in data is that big servers, like big resolvers, have ongoing TCP streams that can live for a very long time. So if you just start dnscap on that data, you won't see the data. So there's various ways to actually go into TCP stream, and there's options to reset it in different ways when it gets out of sync or miss a package and things like that. There's also something I call byte for byte parsing, so it will try and resemble the stream and then go byte for byte looking for DNS, a valid DNS. And when it finds it, it will start parsing it like DNS from that point. And then there was a few bugs with the padded DNS not being parsed correctly. For the plugin itself, we updated it to the RSec 002 version 3 specification. And one of the biggest changes here, I think, I want to mention is that the specification specifies that the DNS needs to be complete. So even truncated DNS is, according to the specification, not to be counted. So the way that this is implemented right now is that it uses LDNS to parse the package, and if LDNS complains, it doesn't count it. So that's something to think about if you're using the RSSM plugin. Also, we have the YAML output that's specified in the specification, and since the specification specifies a 24-hour period, and you might want to save the data more often than that. So there's custom metrics written out that you can then use a script that's included in dnscap to actually merge it to whatever period you want. So for the releases, since last time, dnscap has had a few releases. 1.6, we got updates to the root zone key change plugin, now collects the key tags. And then ROI parse is a plugin written by Raw Aarons. So if you want to parse DNS like ROI, you can do that now. 1.7 and 1.8 got a lot of the RSSM stuff included. And 1.9 got some RSSM fixes. This is the specifications. I had some questions on the specifications, and there were some fixes. And there's also a new option that might be actually interesting for people participating in DITL. So the package filtering that dnscap generates is a bit weird. So if you have host restrictions, it doesn't apply on some parts. I have an option now that kind of moves the host restrictions around everything else. So if you're an operator operating more ccTLDs and you just want to capture one ccTLD, you can actually do that now. The other one would leak stuff like ICMP or fragment package. For drool, just after the last meeting, we released the first stable release. And then we got a few fixes on that because it wasn't really stable. And we have some code, timing code rework based on a POC by Peter Spesnik. And then the next version, the next major version is being rewritten into Lua JIT. DNS JIT. So DNS JIT is something I'm going to talk about later today, and you can come by the demo booth also to play with it yourself. It's more or less parts of all the other tools broken up and then put together again with the script engine in the middle. Some other releases, Packet Queue. There was some leakage of information. So there was some stuff not being initialized correctly. So if the information in memory wasn't overwritten, it would leak to the next record. And then we got a submission for the metadata interfaces for measurement and probes for the RIPE Atlas Go bindings. So some of the new stuff, Check My DNS has a CLI written in Go. This is more or less a small Go script that does the few things that the web page actually does without presenting it. So you'll get the full JSON stream back from the server, and the only additional features from the web interface is that you can actually specify the resolver, because you can't do that in JavaScript, but you can in command line. And like Keith said, drool, new development is coming up, and performance and responses is the focus. So this is funded by Comcast Innovation Fund, and all development will be done in DNS JIT. There will be, focus on performance, the thread model, atomic queues, and stuff like that. And we have a cooperation with CSIDNIC. CSIDNIC. They have a tool called RESPDiff for performance analyzing not resolver or not. And that actually has some scripts to compare different responses with different queries. So we're going to look at how we can integrate that into drool to actually get statistics of how did the query and the response look in the PCAP, and how did the query and response look from the server we sent it to, or replayed it for. And then it's going to go, have more statistics output and things like that. So I think we have time for some questions. Otherwise, just come by the demo booth. And we have all the software set up. You can click, you can play, you can write your own Lua. Yep. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jerry. My turn again. This time I'm channeling William. To say a bit more about the state of our systems and what he's been working on from the past few months. So, as you're probably aware, our infrastructure is physically located in 3 places. Most of it is in Fremont, California with Hurricane Electric, which has got the master copy of our data set and the analysis resources. We have a backup copy of the data set and a little bit of analysis resource in Ottawa, Canada, hosted by Otix. And we also run backup things like name server and the actual backup of the active system config there. NetNod in Sweden are kind enough to host a small couple of servers for us. Again, a little bit of functionality diversity and also a development platform that Jerry uses that is close to him. Once upon a time, OARC had a lab which was funded by the National Science Foundation when it was set up that is, I mean, amazingly, these beasts are still trundling on in terms of actual hardware, but we pretty much shut them down completely now because they are low power, low CPU powered, high energy consumption devices. So that's now pretty much gone away. Yes, I know our portal is old and clunky and written in Perl and difficult and bulky to use. Someday we will redevelop that. One thing I've seen quite a lot of recently is people trying to unsubscribe from the mailing list or change the subscriptions to the members-only mailing list. Because the members-only mailing list is a member benefit, it is controlled through the portal rather than Mailman. So if you need to change things or unsubscribe, please do not try and use Mailman. Please use the portal for that. If you unsubscribe via Mailman, it will just automatically, the portal will just resubscribe you the next day. Just a small reminder of that. And also to use the Jabber, there's an interface via the portal that will generate credentials for you there. We keep that Jabber server pretty locked down in terms of where it can talk to, and also highly up to date in terms of what crypto it's running. Our data set is spread across 6 file servers. As I said, one of these is in Ottawa. The biggest ones, FS1 and FS5, are basically allow us to have more than one data set. We do manage to keep these upgraded ahead of when we need it. In general, we've not had to buy any new storage servers for quite some time because disk technology advances always help us along. So this year, FS2 will be upgrading that from 4 terabyte to 8 terabyte disks, or possibly more than 8, depending on where the sweet price point is. So that's in the budget to give us more capacity to do more DITL collections. These all run FreeBSD. Some use ZFS, some use XFS. And Debian on the storage pods. So total data set size currently sitting at 231 terabytes with some upgrades in the way. We have 4 analysis servers. As I say, we need to do garbage collection on these in terms of deleting former members and idle scratch data. We have this curious thing where I regularly see people who are presenting the results of OARC analysis at workshops, and yet William's monitoring suggests that actually people don't use the servers that much. So the board decided that we should start doing more measurement of who uses the analysis servers in terms of CPU and storage and a number of other resources. So we'll try and get a real quantitative picture there rather than the qualitative one that we have at the moment. We did a little shuffling to accommodate some specific research requirements. In general, that doesn't seem to have impaired the various public services that we offer from IX2. That's the various test beds and test tools. So that was a small kicker, and we'll be spending more on analysis servers later on. Also, all the servers are running Debian 8. The Williams feeling at the moment is that he would prefer to avoid going down the systemd track for these. I expect some of you will have an opinion on that. Please don't shoot me, but give us feedback on how you feel about that, if you have any. And also, as I mentioned earlier, please, if you're going to copy any data off an OARC server, you need to ask us first. And that's going to become more important as things like EU GDPR increase the sensitivity. What I'll also say is that it's not just about asking us. We do police exfiltration of data from the servers. We have some measures in place to prevent large amounts of data being exported. We had, as I say, there was some misunderstanding lately with a specific member, so measures to detect and engage with them were taken on that. As I say, we've had more budget this year for buying an additional analysis server. What we're thinking would be useful, again, happy to take feedback on this, is to have analysis servers which are slightly more powerful than what we have, but instead of them being shared, you've got a specific project as a member, you can book that server for X number of months and have dedicated use of it and access to the data. I mentioned that the existing analysis servers could do with more scratch space. We believe the way that we can do that is to get an external SAS chassis and basically fill that up with some of the older disks that we don't use in the main servers anymore. So we think we can do that for a couple of thousand, so watch this space. There is shared scratch space, which is NFS accessible. Again, please use that efficiently. And that's over the 10 gig core network. So in general, there should be reasonably good performance for most applications on that. New data sets that have come in, we continue to get AS112 queries from one of the biggest AS112 nodes out there, so the biggest dustbin in the internet. We have data from that. We also have a small but reasonably up-to-date resolver data set. This comes from the Case Western connection zone project in Cleveland. These are contributed by Mark Hallman, whose joint appointments at Case and ICSI. So that's we've had that for a few years now, so that's a reasonably consistent resolver data set. Big collections that we've done, DITL 2017, Kirill 2017, these are there for your perusal and analysis. So this year, in April, we'll do the main annual DITL collection, test window next week. So please, it's always a good idea to do a test upload. So if you're contributing to DITL this year, please do the test. If you haven't committed to contributing to DITL this year, we'd love to hear from you. One of the things that's becoming increasingly topical as far as dataset collection is concerned is anonymization. It looks like there's a number of proposals for data. One or two of you already anonymize data before you send it to us. It looks like there are 2 or 3 different proposals for how such uploads might be anonymized. We'd like to track this. We'd like to facilitate this. Please, again, we'd like to hear your opinions on this, and we'd like to hear your ideas and how we can help with making data anonymization both feasible, but also preserving the maximum value of the data set as well. Since the last DITL, we replaced 4 of these ancient clunky power-hungry beasts with 2 more modern, more energy-efficient capture servers. Hopefully that should be sufficient. They're using the same SSH host key and the same IP addresses. You might want to check your scripts and hard-coded configs to make sure that you're not trying to upload to the old 4. It's just A and B now, not C and D. We can resurrect the old beasts if we need the additional resource, but hopefully the new servers there should do the job. This is our annual DITL data collection sizes. You can see that it was a big one last time, and that it continues to increase. So again, thank you for that. And then there's various miscellaneous collections that we've made, including the someone's hanging key, yeah. The other thing that we're seeing is that DITL has always traditionally been done PCAP capture, which captures everything but is not very space efficient. Some of these Anycast clouds out there are getting pretty big. So we've had at least one DITL contributor say, well, this is the internal format that we use. Can you accept that? Because it's a lot more efficient that we use internally. And then there's also work being done on a more open standard for a more compact data collection that one of the operators has proposed to us. Clearly, what we would not like to see is all kinds of different formats out there, because that really reduces the value to researchers. It would be good if we can keep to 1 or 2 open standards, maybe PCAP plus 1 other. We'd like to see discussion and engagement in the community to make sure that this is done as openly, as commonly as possible. And again, we're interested in hearing your feedback on that, but we're certainly working with that root operator who has made some specific proposals for us. And again, it would be nice if the other thing it would be good is to get some common anonymization standards as well. I suspect that anonymization is not going to be a one-size-fits-all thing. Maybe there's going to be more than one scheme for anonymization, but again, it would be good if we didn't have a bazillion different anonymization approaches. Root key, signing key, first step of that happened in 2017. We did a DITL collection for it. Collected slightly more duration, but from just from the root operators. So there's a 19 terabyte data set there, the raw data that came in, and then the cleanup of that. Good patience from iRoot. Longest DITL collection. It took them a while to get everything backhauled from all their nodes, but we got it. So thank you for that. And then about a couple of months after we got the data, it was all processed and available. There was some additional collection in January from FRoot because of the one of their Anycast outsourced partners. So we eventually got all that data. So there are lots of mysteries as far as the key role is concerned. Whether or not our data set contains the answers to these mysteries, I don't know. But we'd be very happy if people did some delving to see if they can figure out some of the more challenging questions on the key role. And then ICANN has decided that the second part of the key role will proceed in October, most likely. And we will be collecting for that. Whether it happens in October or whether it happens at some other date. And again, just use the usual tools. So. Other stuff, the data archive, the storage pods are full, so we're not quite able to be as geographically diverse in our backups as we would like. William's looking at that. We're certainly, as I said, we have budget for 8 terabyte disks, which we'll use to expand our capacity. The SAS expanders for we may use them to upgrade the existing storage servers as well as the analysis servers, depending on how well that works. And we'll probably use the 4 terabyte disks that get swapped out for some scratch space and possibly archiving. Or we could start deleting data. I don't like the idea of deleting data, but that is certainly an option if it gets ahead of us. Some of you may be familiar with the Nagios-based TLDMon service that we operate, which basically runs a series of tests on all the TLDs in operation, allows us to track the number of TLDs that are actually actively up and running, which is starting to decrease slightly instead of increasing. And we have a diverse copy of that in Ottawa, and upgraded the software that's running. Zone file repository, this is copies of the root and other TLZ zones. There's particular ones you want us to track. Be interested to hear about that. We're trying to take this as far back as possible to 93 and 94. If you have old copies of the root zone, these would be quite interesting. There's some migration of these zones to the ICANN CZDS service and away from the traditional way of retrieving it via FTP. William's been working on the API to do the ZFR, and then you can find the entire zone file repository data set at that location on the servers. So, that data in keeping, it shows the growth in the root zone. And you can see that there was a big burst of new GTLDs, and then it kind of flattened off, and actually there's been a slight decline more recently. So that's interesting. And then tracking DS resource records as a way of measuring DNSSEC deployment. We operate an open DNSSEC validating resolver. It started out as a DNSSEC testbed. Unfortunately, most of the use of this, although it's supposed to be for DNSSEC, a lot of people see it as an open resolver without using DNSSEC and just attempt to abuse that. So we have to apply the usual heuristics to safely operate an open resolver. It still generates a lot of back-end data that we keep. There's been various updates to that in terms of trust anchors, runs both bind and unbound. It's possible, again, that there may be insights into the mysteries of the root key role there. But we really wish we had a foolproof way of just completely ignoring all non-DNSSEC queries to this resolver. That would definitely screen the junk. The other thing is we're operating one of the pilot TLS-DNS privacy services. So again, there's a front end on that, which basically backends into the ODVR server. And we've kept all the data from this, but nobody's really had a look at that. It's possible we might get some students to have a look at that, but again, it's there. And this just gives you an idea of some of the traffic and indeed how much of the traffic to the ODVR is actually potentially abusive. So what are we planning on the systems front going forwards? I mentioned upgrading some of the disks in the larger file servers. We came up with this idea, it'd be cool for OARC to operate AS112 nodes, but we haven't really got, we're trying to engage with internet exchange operators in that, but in general, there doesn't seem to be much interest. We need to upgrade our conference running software, Indico. The CERN people who develop it have come up with a new version. It looks like the upgrade process is definitely a leap from one cliff to another over a chasm, so we're certainly not going to tinker with it until this is done. Once it's done, there'll be some significant advantages. It moves over to a standard Postgres database rather than its internal database. It's one of these things that's a pain to use, but it would be even more of a pain to not use. So I see us continuing with Indico. I'm assuming we can get the migration to go smoothly. William's going to try to use some of our spare older hardware to build an analysis cluster as a pilot. It might use Hadoop, it might use OpenMPI, but we'd like to prove that as a concept before we spend a lot of money on a full cluster. More work in cataloging our data. As I said, we could really do with replacing the portal, keeping all the data at the back end, the database at the back end of it, but it would be nice to get something more modern in terms of the portal so you don't feel like you're in a 1994 Perl maze. Getting rid of the old DNS lab hardware, yeah, we need to think more about privacy and anonymity. Compression methods, again, there are various ways that we can compress the data, but we also need to be careful that the compression methods that we use, some have been shown to be less robust for long-term data storage than others. So William's doing some work in looking at the various compression mechanisms. You know, that's a serious decision. So again, feedback is helpful in that. Something new is that there are actually specific compression tools which work with parallel processing. That's pretty much it. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have, but obviously we will channel the feedback to William, who's actually doing the work. Okay. Paul has something to say.
Actually, I have about 4 things to say.
Okay, sure.
I was looking around to see if anyone else. Okay. So first, I'm going to do these in order of what you/William said. Anonymization of source addresses. So anyone here who's on the RSAC caucus has seen the proposed document on that that's going to go to RSAC sometime, but not immediately. So for those of you who aren't on RSAC caucus but are interested in anonymization of source addresses, come see me sometime in the next few days, and we can talk about it. It's a big topic. What you had said about maybe we can harmonize, that's probably a really bad idea, and I can explain why that is. I don't, and in fact, I might even try to do a lightning talk, but I mean, it gets long and involved. But if anyone here who has questions and isn't on RSAC caucus, come see me. If you are on RSAC caucus, please, we're trying to finish up the document. Please do reviews.
To be clear, I said that some degree of harmonization would be useful, but it is unlikely that one size would fit all.
Right, but it's not even clear that some harmonization is going to be useful because different root server operators actually are very concerned about different things. Also, and the flip is
Okay,
not
well,
to-
to that I would say, do not forget the researchers. And
Right, that's exactly where I was gonna go to, which is some forms of harmonization, in fact, are better for researchers than others, and we try to go into that in the RSAC document. But we aren't going to be done, I believe, before the next DITL, and as you said, there will be DITL. So folks can please come talk to me. I'm the document author for the RSAC caucus document, so please come talk to me. Going to the next thing you said about the incoming formats. At this point, there is, for those of you who aren't following, so some folks here don't follow the DNS OARC working group, there is a proposed format for captures that is getting close-ish to working group last call in DNS OARC that uses CBOR, and that can use a lot of review. Imagine trying to recreate PCAP today, like if you said, oh, and it should have this and this and this, you would spend a fair amount of time on a whiteboard, and that's what they have done. So it's a pretty complicated document, but it really could use review. It's not in working group last call yet, but it's getting there, and it is getting a lot of good review. Basically, the way that it gets a lot of compression is not just by gzipping, but by using data structures and taking advantage of that. It has a lot of nice things in it, and it also has some things that may not be good for researchers. So please do take a look at that. You mentioned root zone collection. One of the things that I discovered in looking at some of the old root zone data is that in some days where there were more than one SOA, we don't actually have data. So if you have a collection of root zone data of any age, please do not throw it out until we've had longer discussions, because some of the collections that we have specifically for OARC are a subset. They might be a perfectly good subset because the only thing that happened the day might have been that the SOA changed, but we clearly have some gaps. And I won't bother with the fourth one. So anyways,
Okay.
Do talk to me. Anyone interested in anonymization, do talk to me. It's very timely.
Dave Lawrence, I just had a quick question about one of the very last things you mentioned, that some of the compression systems were not suited to long-term archival, and I was curious just what that is.
Yeah, I think there was some issues with XC. There's been some studies done on this. I really can't tell you the exact ins and outs, but William could answer that question better.
Paul Hoffman, I can give you a quick one on that, which is, for example, the CBOR format that I was just talking about doesn't actually allow you to easily capture bad DNS messages because it's trying to put everything into structure. So for some researchers, knowing when you're getting a piece of garbage is one thing, but getting something that was close but not really good. And as a really good example of this, it used to be that 8.8.8.8 would accept a query whose data was bad, and it would still try to guess and give something. Well, if you can't capture that, then you can't find it later.
Yeah, and my understanding is that there's studies that have been done in at least one format that show that it doesn't actually keep data integrity over the kind of long-term corruption that you get on some kinds of storage media. So that's also a consideration. Okay, thanks for the feedback. Any other questions? Okay, at this point we switch to the member-only session, which is just about governance. So I would ask anyone who's not actually an OARC member to please get your coffee early. I will switch my hat from lapsed engineer to amateur lawyer, and try and just run through the governance changes that have been in the pipeline. Okay, first of all, this is